Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pursuing Excellence podcast. I am your host, Jaden, and today I'm here with my economics professor, Marc Sleiman. He, like I said, taught me economics this past semester in the spring, and I wanted to invite him on the podcast because I have a lot of questions regarding that and just the state of finances now in our country and just a lot of things with that. So thank you for coming on to talk with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Jaden.
Yes, sir. So before we get into the main thing, the main discussions of the episode, Professor, tell me what got you into teaching in the first place? Like when did you know you wanted to become a professor?
During the PhD program, so I started getting interested in economics when it was actually the 2008 recession.
Huh.
So at that point, I remember the presidential election started, and George Bush was getting out, so both the Republicans and the Democrats were having the primaries, and then at that point, there was this congressman called Ron Paul, who was a medical doctor, and was making very extreme claims about the economy, about where we are and where we're going, and he was saying that we're already in a recession. It's just that the way that we measure economics doesn't show it. And people were laughing at him, and then it turns out that we were in a recession. And he was right, and then I started, spending time reading about it, and then just thought it was fascinating. So I decided to eventually go back to college to study economics. And then when I was in the PhD program, my advisor, who is an econometrician, for those who don't know what that means, there are those doing research in statistical methods for social sciences.
Okay.
Right, which is statistics. Everybody takes that first course where you learn all the basics, the mean, the standard deviations, the t-distributions, the few distributions, and we think that that's what it is. But statistics is actually a very broad field, and it's divided into many subcategories. Some of them overlap. And you got to understand that things like, for example, somebody who came up with a distribution, the normal distribution, the t-distribution, had to invent it, right? So there are scientists behind it that come up with ways and tools to be able to measure statistical data or statistical objects.
Right.
Right. And that's what he does today. He's pushing the boundary of our statistical methods further so that we have new tools to analyze either new problems or problems that still exist that we don't have, or there's still room to make improvements, right? So I started working with him, and then he asked me if I could teach a chapter for him in econometrics. And I realized that not only did I enjoy it, I enjoy being in front of students and talking to them and being able to relate to the problems that they were having, because I think that's maybe one of the biggest boundaries that students and professors have, is that professors almost forget what it was like to be a first year, second year, third year, fourth year, and then they communicate in a way that has a disconnect.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And the fact that I was there and I could still, because I was still a student, understand where they were going through, made it that they liked it, and they started requesting me. They asked if I could teach a few more lectures, which my advisor allowed me to do, and then later on I just keep teaching more and more, and I got better at it, and I realized I enjoy being in front of a classroom and then spending the extra time on the side helping students know how to make use of their time in college, how to prepare for what's coming afterwards that they can't see, because the only reason you're in college is to prepare yourself for everything that's going to come afterwards. And if you don't know how to prepare yourself and what you're actually doing and what's coming later, then you're going to waste a lot of time, which is what most people do. And actually you see that some statistics that say that most people who graduate end up at some point in their career doing something that had nothing to do with their degree, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then you would wonder, what does that really mean? Does that mean it was useless? No, it doesn't. For example, my background was in mathematics. I got my bachelor's and master's in mathematics. And it came because I used to be a very bad student. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of people think that those who go and get a PhD are usually good students. So when I was in middle school and high school, I was, quite frankly, I can say this now that I'm done with ever going to school. But
Yeah.
I was a C student, and I had a hard time focusing. I was I had a lot of energy, and I just did not want to sit down and listen for hours and then go home and do extra reading and homework and stuff like that. So I was just having a very difficult time channeling my energy in that way. And I grew up in France for my secondary studies. And over there, the way that the system is designed is that the last 2 years of your high school, people branch out from like general studies, what they call it, to different fields. So you could do like literature and arts, which would be one track. Then you got the social sciences, and then you got the sciences.
Right.
And then in the last year, you even specialized out of the three sciences, which is, because I went into science route, which of the three did you want to specialize in? And nowadays it changed. It became more Americanized in the sense that you get to pick classes you want and everything, which the rest of the world does not function that way. Like when you're in first year, for example, everyone does the same thing. You go to the same class, you get the,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And there is no, I picked micro, but not macro, and macro, but not micro. I don't want to do any economics, I want to pick another social. And now everybody's going, it's very standardized in that sense.
Okay. Yeah.
And my math teacher at that time was very hard. Like she was known to put the bar very, very, very high on students. And we had 10 hours a week of mathematics, just to tell you. And every other week we had an exam, and the week that we didn't have an exam, we had like a huge assignment to turn in on top of 10 hours a week of class. And she was just so passionate about it that I felt like I had to be passionate about it. And then I realized that I actually did have the capacity to do this. It's just that I never cared before, you know?
Right.
And then throughout, as I kept on growing and doing mathematics, I realized that it's not so much that I need it for what I do in every day. It's just how it shapes your brain. It makes you look at life a specific way. You build certain connections that allow you to use those reasonings in everyday life, right? And then, like one thing that I wish I would have done more was reading, writing, and improving on my, my vocabulary, my ability to communicate. You see some, and you see that a lot in economics, because economics, I would say, is the most well-rounded field in the sense that you need to know how to read, you need to know how to write, because you read a lot of papers.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And the papers are dry. Like I remember the first time I was reading papers, like I could not read it for too long. I was like, what am I reading? Like, it's like reading a law, or regulations. Like it's just, at first, it's not fun.
Yeah.
Right? Like you got to learn how to read that kind of stuff. I kind of like to look at it as when we were kids, we used to read books that had colors and pictures, and then at some point it jumps, and then you just have a lot of, you go from less and less colors and pictures to
More
like
words.
just text and words. And
Words,
then you're like,
yeah.
I kind of miss those colors and pictures. It feels like that,
Right.
But you see some that just write so well, like it's just incredible, and then, but at the same time, they're not too technical, right? And then you'll see some other faculty members that are extremely technical, like they have top quantitative skills. But then when you read their paper, you can tell that most of their, preparation in life for their career, which is academia, has been quantitative, right? And I got fortunate. I was on the more quantitative side. I was working with somebody who was the complete opposite. We literally had complete opposite skills. So when we would work together, he would write so well that I've learned how to write with him, right? And that made me realize that there really is a huge value in learning also what you don't know. So going through all these steps not only shapes how you think, shapes how you look at the world, but it also tells you some things you should work on, like some skills that are important.
Yeah, for sure.
And to me, like what I enjoy about teaching the most is not, I'm gonna tell you what faculty members don't want to do. Nobody wants to do the grading. Nobody wants to deal with, all the administrative problems of enrollment and all that stuff, the curving at the end or not curving and dealing with all the complaints. Like the fun part is the human interaction. And in a world where everything is becoming digital, human interactions are, falling down little by little. Everybody's very focused on their phones, or, they're focused on their computers or gaming. Like,
Right.
for example, I would hear that, and I could see that, like, where I grew up, we used to live in an area where parents would literally kick us out of the house. It's like, go outside and play, and all the kids would go out and play. And we would go in tree houses, we'll play soccer, we'll play basketball, we'd ride our bikes, you know what I mean? Like, we were never inside
Yeah.
unless it was, like, very bad weather. And then I go back to the same places where we used to play, and nobody's out, except for people that are of our generation that still enjoy going outside. And all the new generation is
On their phones.
on their phones or on an iPad or on a computer or,
Yeah.
or in front of a Xbox or PlayStation. And
Yeah.
so that to me is unnatural, because we are, at the end of the day, constructed as animals. We still have the building blocks of a social animal, right? It is, if you put away all the technology, after a while, we will naturally just start talking to each other and laughing, bonding, and creating connections and sharing insights. That's a natural thing to do, right? So that's the part about it that I liked and that made me want to always have at least a foot in that area.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've always wondered, like, it's like with professors, because of course I'm on the student side of it. I don't know how, how you guys look at it, but you mentioned human interaction, which is interesting, because of course there's that line, right? It's like, oh, you come to class, the professor gives a lecture, and everybody leaves, right? But sometimes I try to make the effort to talk to my professors, to get to know them, to meet them, because you can make valuable connections, and you can learn things from that person or vice versa that you never knew before. So, like, I learned things from you as well. So, in your class,
Well, really the thing is, and I'm going to be upfront, a lot of professors, that's the thing, like, for example, there's two types of professors. There are those that are on the research track,
Yeah.
or the tenure track. They're the majority of the professors. And then there are those who, there's, like, this is the main category. The other category are those who just like teaching.
yeah,
Right? And they're not really concerned about the publishing papers and going from assistant to associate to a full professor.
Right.
And then you got those who like teaching, but they'll just teach one or two classes a semester, part-time, and they have other activities on the side. That's not their main breadwinner, right?
Yeah.
They're doing other things. Now, and you can see, like, even if you are interested in talking to professors at the end of class, you realize that out of your whole bachelor, and if you continue and get a master's or whatever, you'll have like 2-3 professors that really stand out.
yeah,
And those are the ones that make a big difference in your life, right? Like, you'll go, you'll meet them, and then something will happen where in that interaction where you guys connect, and then that professor can really share a lot of what he's accumulated over the years with you, so that you can get the maximum use out of it. And that's kind of what happened to me when I was like I was saying, in high school, that math professor. It just shaped how I looked at everything. I went from like a C- student to an A student in 3 months. And it went from going from, like, basic algebra that I couldn't do, to entering calculus. And then the more abstract it got and the more difficult it got, the more my brain was capable of connecting those dots, right? And it just became natural,
right,
right? And moving somebody like that, I think, is, or in whichever way that the professor can, like, when that professor has an impact like that, that's what the students should be looking for. And they should go and try to see who they can build that connection with. The truth is, like, you can do that every semester. And then by the end, you'll have 2-3 professors that would really stand out for you and make an impact and change how the trajectory of your life, right, in a positive way. And that's something that students should be looking for, right? Like, they should really try to find those that are there to make that change in them. And one professor might work for you, might not work for somebody else, right? Like, that connection may not happen.
yeah, for sure. I understand. So yeah, moving off of that front. So you obviously study economics in our world. So today, I want to get your thoughts on, like, why do you believe, like, we're struggling right now so far as a country, as far as, like, inflation and things like that, and how the economy, just how our decisions affect really the economy on a global scale.
Yeah, which decisions?
I mean, just any decisions.
So the thing is, really, inflation. The original definition of inflation was increase in the money supply.
Uh,
Right? You're inflating the money supply. The consequence of that was that prices will adjust. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah.
So if you go to an old economics dictionary and you look at the definition, that's what it was. What happened was that, you know, we used to be on a gold standard. Right? That means that we had a certain amount of gold that had an actual value, and we had a certain amount of money, paper bills, if you want to call that, even though a lot of the money is digital. And they would say, for this much paper money that you have, you can exchange it for this much gold because we have the gold to back it up every single time. So you could start doing the trade. And then at some point, the Federal Reserve was expanding the money supply so much that we just couldn't meet the obligation. You know, like when people are asking, say, can you give me my gold instead? I don't want your paper bill. And they're like, well, if everybody does this, then we just don't have enough gold. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And so we abandoned the gold standard, and then we increased the money supply quicker and quicker. And what that does is that if you think about what an economy is, it's people creating things of value and exchanging them, right? So like a very simple analogy would be, let's say that a group of people like you, me, and a few other people on an island, you know, we're starting from scratch. We've got absolutely no technology whatsoever. And the only thing that we really do all day is go to the beach, sit down, and try to catch fish with our hands. And we're so not designed as humans to catch fish with our hands that it's hard for us to grab the fish out, right? So we just catch one a day. Okay? Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yep.
Our production as a society is one fish per day per person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then at some point, you sit down at night when we're having a little fire and talking and everything, and then you come up with this idea of creating something that can catch fish, right? And then you get a branch, and then you start taking leaves, and you roll them together, and you start making the first net, and it's absolute crap, to be honest, because it's your first one.
Right, yeah.
And then you try the first day, it doesn't work, and then the next night you work on it again, you improve it. After a while, you're able to catch 2 fish that day. You made improvement, right? Your productivity went up, right? You put in all that extra work to increase productivity. There are tangible fish that we can eat that increased. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if we were like 3 people on an island, or 4 people on an island, right, and then you increase the fish by 1 to 2 a day, so having 4 fish a day, we have 5. That's a 25% increase, okay? Now, let's say that some of us collect leaves, and then we have a process of cutting them out and putting markings on it to create what we call currency. So we can exchange things, right? So during that time, one of us decides to stop fishing because now you're making more fish, and he goes and figures out how to get coconuts. The other person says, you know what, I created a new technology to get coconuts, and one less person needs to catch fish, and we can start doing other things. And all of a sudden, you know, we're creating more and more products. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Now, suppose that we reach a point of equilibrium. You've improved your nets. You catch 5 fish a day. The next person gets 5 coconuts a day. The next person gets 10 bananas a day. The next person gets something else, right? It doesn't matter what it is. And then as things change, you know, weather patterns, seasons, the number of fish and coconuts and bananas and everything changes, right?
Right.
And what we do is we have these paper bills that are leaves that we've cut through the trees, big leaves, and we wrote down, this is worth this much. And we start trading leaves to pay for each other. If I go and I get extra leaves, and I cut them out, and I write things on it to say this is worth an extra, whatever the currency is, and now we double the amount of leaf bills that we have. Did we really increase anything? We just made
No.
everything more expensive. We just need double the amount of paper
Right.
for the same amount of fish and coconuts and bananas that we need, right?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah.
So when you increase the money supply, you've inflated the amount of money. Money isn't worth anything if there's nothing behind it really to be able to buy. Like, for example, let's say that you came with $1 billion on an island that's never heard of you in the middle of the Pacific, and you come with cash, and they don't produce anything, right? And they don't even know what your money is. It's not worth anything. It's only worth something because there's an agreement indirectly of what it is. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
And what happens is that when all that money gets flooded, because during COVID, we produced less. Factories closed down. Companies worked less. People worked from home, right? So money supply went up. Actual production went down. People were consuming because they just had free money. And the system didn't have time yet to incorporate that new amount of money in the system. It's still circulating.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Right. Right. Right.
And then, so now we reached a point where, so at first people were saving money, right? Because you're getting money. You're not really doing anything. You're not going to clubs. You're not going to restaurants as much. There's a lot of things that you're not doing. So you would just go online and buy stuff. So online businesses did really well. And then you would save. And because you saved, you had extra money to spend at some point. And then the economy opened up again. People started living their lives and enjoying things that they wanted to enjoy. And they had a lot of money, but we're still not really making a lot, right? And now savings, all those things, we have $2 trillion of savings. It's pretty much gone. So people are going back to credit cards, right? And we're in this momentum where everything costs a lot of money because supply chains have been disrupted. I can tell you, like I was telling you, I also do other things on the side. I work in aviation. We work with maintenance centers. The whole supply chains get affected. When you have a supply shock, a negative supply shock, what happens to prices? They go up.
They go up.
Right? And that's what happened. So there was a negative supply shock. It's hard for me to find qualified people to be able to provide me this good that I need for my factory. It's going to affect my output, right? And that means that people still need it. The money's been around, it's been printed. They're going to pay for it. They got extra money because we printed for it, so they're going to pay even more for it, even though there's less. So now everything is going up in prices. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Yeah. Because I think I think with inflation, we tend to have this misconception that it's like, oh well, inflation is like the prices are increased and stuff, and it's like everything, like bread's $10, milk's $5 or whatever. It's like, everything's gone up. We don't really know why it is. People think they know, but they don't really know why.
There's two main things, three main things, right? But the most centralized one is monetary policy. The Federal Reserve has a monopoly on money, right? Which was not the case. Historically speaking, that's a very modern creation, right? The central banking and monopoly on money is a modern thing. Back in the day in the United States, there were multiple currencies competing, which is the idea of why cryptocurrencies came out. They're saying, why would it be centralized? Why would there be a monopoly on money? For example, let's say that we reach a point where we have 50% inflation every year. You know how hard it is to write a contract like that, where you incorporate all the accounting system based on the fact that you get crazy inflation. You get late payments, and then you disagree, and then you get interest on debt, and then you want to bill your client again. Like, it's very hard, which is why stability in prices was important, which was the initial goal of what central planning was supposed to do, right? That's what they had promised. But you see a lot of hyperinflation happen in poorer countries where they've expanded their money supply too much. And the other one would be a supply shock will affect prices, right? So let's say that we grow a lot of food in the U.S., okay? And then we eat our own food, right? And we produce so much that we even sell some of the food overseas.
Yeah.
And then we have terrible weather. We have tornadoes that just wiped out our fields. And then it didn't rain, so everything dried up. And then our food supply fell from you know, got cut in half. We got half the amount of food. We still got the same amount of people,
Right.
right? So that's a shock in the supply, right? Then you could have a shock in the demand. Like, let's say that this new disease comes out and everybody realizes that eating apples is the best natural cure for it that we can have until the medicine comes out.
So we buy apples.
Everybody's gonna want apples.
Yeah.
People are gonna start planting apple trees in their backyard.
Yeah.
Like that's what's gonna happen. So there's a demand shock in that case, right? So you can have a supply shock, a demand shock, but usually those things are kind of like external, right? Whether like I can't predict what's gonna happen tomorrow, right? We have models to predict it, but like if tomorrow there's gonna be a solar flare that's going to tremendously affect our weather patterns, we're probably not able to catch that, right? Or if we can't tell like in fall which hurricanes are going to come out yet and how strong they're going to be and where they're going to go in the United States.
Right.
See what I'm saying? Like a lot of these things we just can't predict. But central planning for monetary policy it is a monopoly system. And by manipulating the money supply, which, you know, when you increase it and you have prices go up, it's basically a way to tax you without saying, I'm going to increase taxes on you directly, right? Because what happens is that, let's say we need an extra $50 billion for a project. Well, if you had to tax everybody directly and say, we're going to increase everybody's taxes by 1%, you'll see that directly, and you'll be like, no, I don't want to do that. But if they increase the money supply, then they create an extra $50 billion, they use it for whatever they want to do, and then your prices go up, and then your purchasing power fell. So it's as if you lost money anyways, right?
Right. Okay. It makes sense. Yeah. Because I've always wondered, like, about inflation. You know, and we didn't touch too much on it in our class, but I always just wondered, like, what the actual true cause of it was, because it's like it affects everybody. So it's like, you know, everybody. I mean, so especially now, I mean, because, you know, like you mentioned earlier, we're college students. I mean, we're going to school, but at the same time, trying to work and take care of ourselves and having to, you know, it's so
It's
these things
very
are,
difficult.
yeah,
It's very difficult.
it's yeah. So,
Like I know that I'll give you a basic example, but even the PhD students, they get a stipend for research, and every once in a while they adjust it, but I can guarantee you that the inflation adjustment hasn't been done. You know, it's not like they're looking at it, they'll just increase it.
yeah,
So, and I'm sure that they're struggling way more today than I was when it was my turn,
right.
you know. But in terms of you know, just to go back to that question you asked, when people hear the government's sending $2,000 checks to everybody, that's not good news. That is not good news. There's no free $2,000.
Nothing's free.
Unless they had saved it because they were managing the government like a business.
Right.
And then we wouldn't have debt like we have it today. We would be able to pay all of our obligations, and they had savings. And then they say, well, we have savings now. We'll use it because there's a hard time. Like, for example, at an individual level or at a corporate level, companies save. When they go through difficult times,
Yeah.
they can use some of their savings to go through that storm, right? Same thing for us. You save money, and then one day, for example, the economy's not doing well, the company decides to cut your wages by 30%. You need time to readjust because you got a lifestyle. You have savings that allows you to spend that money for emergencies. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes.
So, but we don't have that in our government. So all they do is increase the money supply, which means inflate the prices. And the problem with that is that the money is going to places that are not efficient. Because if we had what we call, and it's in it, every system is an imperfect system. I'm gonna make that clear from the beginning. But if we had the free markets that would dictate where the money would go, then the way that the government or the central bank increases the money supply and moves it in the economy would not match what the market would have done if that was somebody else's savings. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it can go in places that's very inefficient in the economy, and all of a sudden, there's an unnatural amount of money flowing there,
Mm-hmm.
and it would have been more efficient elsewhere, and that's why we go through bubbles sometimes. For example, too much money went into banking, and then banks started doing all their crazy thing, and they were like, well, that should never have happened. The money should never have gone there. They should not be buying all these little banks and consolidating and doing these things, so that now that they're too consolidated, when one of them goes bad, it has a huge impact on others. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
So many times when we see this bailout happen or free money is given, it always comes at a cost. And the truth is, nobody really understands the cost. We can intellectually discuss it and say these are the implications, but nothing is really free in this world. It's just like in life. Anything that you do is you had to burn calories to do it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in economics. Everything that you have, even when you get that free paycheck, cost exists. It's not $2,000 for free that you got.
Right.
There's a catch.
Right.
When they say something is too good to be true, that's too good to be true. It doesn't just appear magically,
Yeah.
you know.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, because I've always heard nothing is free in life. Nothing.
Nothing.
It's like, wait, no. It costs something. It may not be a cost that you directly have to
Direct.
pay,
Yeah.
but it costs you something, or it costs somebody something somewhere, right?
Exactly.
So that's just something I like to think about. But one of my favorite things that you talked about in class with us was it was because one of the few things I did actually like. No offense though.
No, I know it's a hard class. It gets very dry compared to macroeconomics, right? People who do micro, the first like, why is all this conceptual?
Right.
You know.
Yeah. So it was opportunity cost, opportunity benefits. So I'll let you explain it to the viewers. If you don't know what that means, but it was interesting to me. So could you kind of just give a synopsis of what that has to do with us and how that works?
Opportunity cost is basically the idea that, we can only really do one thing at a time.
Right.
And that's what the whole idea of, be present. When you're present and you're doing something like right now, I can talk to you, but if I'm talking to you while you're talking to me, I can't listen to you, right?
Right.
Either I listen to you or I talk to you. And if I'm either listening or talking to you, I can't be writing something else. I can only do one thing at a time. And every time I'm doing that one thing, I can't do anything else. So I have to forego everything else that I'm doing, right? So the cost for me to be talking to you right now is I'm foregoing listening to you. I'm foregoing listening to something else. I'm foregoing writing. I'm foregoing maybe walking out of the room or any other thing. The whole list of infinite other things that I could be doing with my time right now
Yeah.
is foregone. So I lost that, right?
Right.
That's the cost. That's what an opportunity cost is. So if you're deciding to go to work, okay, and you go to work you have a job right now?
I do have a job. Yes.
Where at?
I work at FedEx right now.
At FedEx. Okay.
FedEx. Yeah.
Right. So you work at FedEx. When you decide to go to work at FedEx, you could be going on Skillshare and learning a new skill. You could be reading a book and learning something. You could be writing a book. You could be taking a class. You could be exercising,
Right.
right? You could be traveling. You could be joining a network group, right? There's a lot of things that you could do. All of them will provide you with a positive outcome, but you've decided to work at FedEx that day.
Yeah.
For what? And the value is more than just the monetary value. You're learning about stuff. You're learning about logistical issues, software issues, HR issues, who are good employees, who are bad employees, what are problems that exist, customer issues, what do they usually bring, how often do they bring these things, how does weather affect how often they come in, like all the little things that are important to know, because there's no, this is important, this is not, like everything is important so that you're more aware of the reality of that job at every little aspect, which is why we care about experience, because we want you to also know the little things you're gaining, right? And the opportunity cost is basically saying when you do that, you're not doing the other things, and there's a cost to it, right? So a lot of students right now, I'm sure they're asking themselves, saying, life is hard, life is expensive. Should I waste time going to school? or should I just be working 50 hours a week and pay for my bills, right?
Right.
And that's what the opportunity cost is. And the question that they should ask themselves, and it's not a simple question. I don't believe there's a clear cut yes, no for anything. Everybody's different. Is that if I decide to enjoy less consumable pleasure today by not working as much and then going to college to get an education, will the payoff be worth it after I graduate and I go through that sacrifice? Because that's really what it is. And when you look at, if we go back to that island question that we were talking about, when you were doing the net, you were not hanging out in front of the fire with us. You're not participating in the communication. You probably spent some time during the day to not fish so that you could build the net in the hopes that tomorrow you could get a win. So you sacrificed a lot of things that were fun to you so that you could build that net, so you can get more fish, so you can work every other day instead of every day at some point. And you took a risk. So that's a big part of the equation. You're taking a risk. You don't know how the payout's going to be. Maybe it was not worth it for you, right?
Right.
But you'll never observe that parallel reality where you made the alternative decisions. And then, and it's hard. Like it's, you're not going to find it as enjoyable. But and I'm not trying to advocate to go for it, I'm saying, but in general in life, people who are very successful find happiness, pleasure, and satisfaction in going through difficulty. They transform it away from making it painful, right? Like if I had asked everybody, I wake up at 4:30, go to the gym at 5, and do all that, they'll be like, it feels like punishment. Right?
Yeah.
But those high achievers that become billionaires or, athletes are those who found a way to get a dopamine release out of accomplishing a lot of things during that day. And they see difficulty as something they're like, okay, this is going to be hard. That means that I'm about to grow. And they're excited about it because I'm going to overcome the old version of me. And now it's not going to be hard after this.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And whatever it is, like, let's say that, you're thinking the opportunity cost. Should I go to school? Should I not go to school? Life is hard. I don't have family that helps me. And,
Right.
like everybody's got different problems, and I know that we think that if you had more money, you had less problems. You really don't. And I can promise you that, and I'll go back onto examples of how it's not true and how even like you could measure people's income and wealth and you see that it's not the more money, the happier people are. Like if you believe in measuring psychology to some degree, then that's not what the results show. So it's not like if I had more money, I have less problems. You have different kinds of problems. You may prefer other kinds of problems in life.
Yeah.
Right? That's real. But it doesn't mean that more money means less problems. Right? Now, let's say that you're a college student. You're in your first year. You're taking classes. You don't know what major to choose. You just want to go to college because everybody your age is going to college. Is that a good reason to go to college? I don't think so.
No.
You see
Not
what
at
I'm
all.
saying?
Not at
And
all.
that's a very common thing. Like talk to a lot of students who change their minds and they're trying to figure out what to do. It's like, well, you should only be spending that much time and money in gaining skills and knowledge and everything if you have a decent idea of who you are and where you want to go next. And if that means that you need to spend some time working so you can see what society is really like outside of high school, if it means you want to take some risks so that you could see who you really are, what you're capable of, and what your thresholds are and what you want to do, then that's actually a great move, But I think that in the mindset that people should have from now on is that we're going to go through a more difficult time than what our parents have gone through. They kind of live, people who are the boomers who were born in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, knew a better era than what we had. After World War II, the United States came on top of the world. The Western world in general came on top of the world. The United States had all the industrial infrastructure for manufacturing and engineering, so we were the only ones there.
Right.
pretty much doing things. So whatever we did, the whole world would buy. We didn't have competition from China, Japan, England, France, Germany, Russia, South Africa, like India. Now everybody is starting to come up and say we can do some of these things too. And so we're not sitting on top of the world like we used to, and we're going to have to compete. We lived in a world where we didn't have to compete as much, and gradually competition came up internationally. And then now we have to ask ourselves, is our education system really that good? Are our public systems really great? Are we really outperforming everybody in all these metrics that's going to allow us to produce the best scientists and engineers and creators? And are we really? And the answer is no, and it's going to catch up. And it is catching up on us. Like, for example, you'll see that in STEM majors, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, which is really like the building blocks of what makes society more advanced.
Yeah.
A lot of them are foreign students, especially as you start going to like graduate level engineering, for example. A lot of it are foreign students coming who had fantastic preparation. They were probably some of the best of their country to begin with. And then they come here and then they do it. But what happens the day that they learn and they start opening a business in their own country? And they're going to compete internationally because we have the technological capacity to do that, right?
Of course.
Things are going to change, right? And like, just to give a perspective, Russia, which is less than half of our population, has more students graduating from STEM majors that are Russian than we have Americans going to college and graduating in STEM majors.
Wow.
We're importing STEM majors. And to be honest, our immigration policy is not necessarily very friendly to them, to keep them.
Right.
The whole process to stay in the country and get a green card is very difficult. So it's not like they come in and then they just stay.
Yeah.
A lot of them go back, right? So other countries are producing more scientists. So what's going to happen within 30 years? Because today we have a huge pool of engineers that are leaving the country, and not leaving the country, that are retiring because they were of a different era. And that's when NASA was doing the whole space race with Russia. And at that time, the United States not only had a huge influx of scientists that came from Nazi Germany, who at the time was the most advanced technologically civilization, I mean, granted, a lot of what they did is not to be lauded, right? But they did have top-notch scientists at the time. And they came here, so we had a huge influx, a supply influx of scientists. They actually got split between the Soviet Union, who had East Germany, and the United States that had West Germany.
Right.
And then we've produced an enormous amount of scientists that went to NASA and got trained to be like the best scientists in the history of humanity kind of thing. And these, after NASA significantly shrank their program, these scientists went to all these other companies like IBM and all over, Ford and everything, and they produced high quality engineering everywhere. It was like kind of like a subsidizing gray matter for the country. And we're not in that era anymore. So not only are we not manufacturing, we're also seeing risks that we don't have enough, not only just STEM majors, but qualified STEM majors. And then if all of these boomers retire all of a sudden, then the transfer of knowledge is not going to happen.
Right.
So it's not like I just went to school and I know. You need a system, an organization that allows you to transfer all those years of experience, so that you see, as an example, somebody who's been making cars for his whole life, when he sees a young person come in, he's able to transfer some of his experience and knowledge so that he'll be able to carry it on further, right? But if there's like that gap, because a lot of them are retiring or having a hard time replacing them, a lot of people are going to retire and not transfer their knowledge. So I don't think overall, these are just a few examples, I don't think overall we should expect that hopefully inflation will go back down and we'll go back to where we were before. Overall, we're going to face more competition from overseas.
Right.
The demand for the dollar is falling. I mean, there's what we call the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And there are a lot of countries that have requested to join the BRICS group to trade without using the dollar, which means that a lot of the reasons why we haven't had hyperinflation problems is because there's an artificial demand for a currency. And if that goes away, it's going to be like the British pound situation. The British pound used to be what the US dollar was.
Right.
And when
Yeah.
that goes away, then we're going to be like every other currency on the planet. So we're going to have to be stricter on our finance. So we're going to have to go and change our way of doing things. So overall, plan as if things are going to get harder. Don't plan as if this is just a short, temporary 1 or 2 year thing and then we're going to get it back on track. Because if I'm right, then you've positioned yourself properly compared to everybody else. And if I'm wrong, you still positioned yourself well because you're assuming that things are going to get harder, it's going to get easy. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like you're going to take an exam and you looked at every hard problem in the book because you thought that it's just going to be hard questions. So, and then you take the exam, it's actually the easy questions. Like, this is so easy, I'm done in 20 minutes. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. So essentially you're saying it's never going to get better. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying that don't count the next 2-3 years to just be an improvement from where we're at, and you'll be safer that way.
Okay.
And how you look at things, right? Think of it as things are going to get hard. Let me position myself that when it does get hard, that I'm doing okay.
Right.
And that way that if it actually does get better, then you'll be like, I'm doing really well. Because I thought that things were going to get bad, and they're not.
Right.
And now I've taken so many steps. You know, like I said, I worked in aviation, and something we have in aviation that is very strict is that there's all these redundancy systems in every aspect. From like an engineering point of view, if something breaks, there's always something else to back it up and something else to back it up so that we barely have any accidents, right? Like, when was the last time you heard of a crash? 737 MAX?
Yeah.
Poor design. When was the one before that? It's not that often. Do you know how many planes fly every day? And somehow they all land, right? The reason is that there's so many systems of redundancy to avoid that crash, even from the way the control tower works, the pilots work, the engineering team on the ground is helping those that are in flight and everything. It's so well designed.
Right.
It's designed purposely to avoid those things.
Of course.
And given that it's not like we can look and say, okay, all these hard times are behind us, we have so many things in our advantage to look forward to that we can just assume that the future is going to look better. We don't, right? Like I said, we have labor issues, we have geopolitical issues, we have monetary issues. You see what I'm saying? We have geopolitical issues. We have so many issues ahead of us that you might as well prepare for a storm and start collecting food, getting shelter ready, you know, preparing as if everything was going to get bad. And that way, if you don't need it, then you just have extra savings in some way, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, now, Professor, I will be honest. If milk goes up to $15 and $20, I might have to pack it up and go to Mars.
I understand.
Because I can't, like, that's crazy. But I joke, I kid. But I understand, you know, and like you said, prepare. Because if you're, I mean, it'd be better to be over prepared than not prepared at all, right?
Yeah.
So
There's this great quote, and people should know it. It's, think like an optimist, prepare like you're paranoid.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You gotta work hard toward accomplishing things in a very optimistic way, but also be very paranoid where you're covering all your bases so that if something does go wrong, the paranoid survive, right? So that
Right.
you'll be ready. So I'm not saying start shaking in fear and brace for impact. I'm saying this is a great time to put a lot of energy and to really reflect on how to cover your bases so that if things do get ugly, that you're not caught by surprise and having to adapt. You already have a strategy in place for those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. That is great, Professor, and that's exactly what I was hoping to kind of hear, just to see, because, you know, again, this is a problem that's affecting everyone now. So, you know, especially as you go and grow into yeah, like we're adults. We're in this world now. We're, so this affects everybody. So thank you for sharing your light on that. And there's one more thing before we get off, Professor, that I want to ask, because something you do in your class, and like the viewers need to know this. So it's like you have a no phone policy in your class.
Correct.
Now, when somebody uses their phone, you make them get up and dance. Why is that? I'm curious where that came from.
So the thing is that phones are addictive, right? And once you go on your phone, you literally forget about everything happening around you. And it's the opposite of being synchronized, having your mind and your body synchronized.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if I catch you on your phone, the idea is that I want you to wake up, because it puts you in this like semi-sleep mode where you're just swiping or scrolling on your phone, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To come back where your mind and your body are back into synchronization in a way that's fun for everybody. Do you see what I'm saying?
Dancing.
It's like there's music, it's nice, you get to move your body, we all get to laugh together, and then that's it. And if you are afraid of dancing in front of people, because some people have that fear, like they don't want to be watched by 100 other people dancing,
Yeah.
then just put your phone away and listen. It's not that hard to put your phone away for 1 hour. If you're having a problem putting your phone away for 1 hour, you should really, really look into yourself and say, how is it possible that I am so dependent on this object that it's controlling me? That's a big deal.
Right.
Why would anything have any control over you? If I could finish our conversation on this one thing, okay?
Okay.
We live in what we call the land of the free. How free are you if you don't have control over your own mind and emotions? Right?
Right.
And if you cannot, for an hour and 15 minutes, not fall for that addiction of yours, then you're not a free person. Freedom is that no matter what happens, nothing controls how you feel. Nothing controls or influences how you're going to move. You're in control of yourself. You're free to choose whatever you want for yourself without all these external influences. And what I mean external, that phone has been designed by engineers that work for casinos in Las Vegas to make it as addictive as possible. It is one of the most highly addictive substances. When we measure dopamine releases in the brain, it's been designed like a casino. Right? And if one thing you need to be able to do is have control over your urges. And if you can't do that, then that's really not my fault. All I'm doing is making it a fun way for you to all come back to your senses and be like, hey, I'm in class, I'm paying a lot of money, so that's my direct cost. I also have an indirect cost, which is my opportunity cost. I could be spending this time very wisely going on Instagram, going on Facebook, going on Snapchat, going on TikTok, answering friends on group messages. When you're spending that much direct and indirect cost-wise, I'm not doing you a favor by letting you do it. If that makes sense.
I understand, and I'm glad that I've never gotten caught. Or, I mean, yes, that I've never gotten caught, because I am not a dancer. So, everybody out there, I'm not a dancer. So, thankfully, I haven't gotten on your list. While I was in your class. But Professor Sleiman, thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking about economics and inflation, all these things that we need to know. They're very important in our society today. And I really took some valuable points from our conversation today. So thank you again for that.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hope to see you soon then.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.
All right, guys. You see us next time on Pursuing Excellence. I'm your host, Jaden, and we will